Hey everyone, welcome to the Gaming X. Today we're taking a look at Garage or Garage depending on where you're from for the Nintendo Switch. Now this is a game I've been looking forward to now for some time. It's a game that embodies a ultra-violent grind-out B-movie influence all set within a top-down universe. But can it deliver on the promising premise? So before we do jump in, if you are new here, then consider hitting subscribe. It truly helps the channel, and we have a ton of Switch reviews, news and giveaways coming up. With that being said, let's get started. So first of all, the story, and you'll be taking on the role of Butch, a drug dealer who awakens in the trunk of a car. Now as you climb out, you'll find things have taken a turn for the worse, and all hell has broken loose in the garage you find yourself in. Expect to find yourself in a fight for survival against enemies such as rats, zombies, human modification gone wrong, and armed enemy soldiers. While it's not the most developed of storylines, I will say, it does enough to embody its influences and match the necessary tone. So graphics and Garage, I've got to say it sets out to impress in the opening moments. Instantly it sets the tone for the game to come. The world is dark, it's viewed with a CRT style overlay, it's definitely bloody. And as I said at the beginning, you start off trapped in the back of a car with no recollection of what occurred. It has all the makings of a fantastic grindhouse feature, and there's no doubt about it. The art style itself, while not too dissimilar to its peers in the genre, it creates its own unique world, one of monsters, armed soldiers, and some truly unique boss battles. In fact, a particular highlight for me was a human centipede clone who embodies the horror of the original movie character in all its glory. Then, alongside the top-down view, you'll additionally be treated to the occasional cutscene and overlaid conversational segments. Now these 2D almost cartoon cell segments, they do a fantastic job of relaying the storyline, and they're able here to give a bit more detail to the horrors surrounding you. Now finally, when it comes to the goods, there's some insanely fun drugged out moments where you pop some pills and the world comes to life in neon as it waves across your screen. Now I will say these colourful moments were needed amidst all the black and red the game presents, and they are immensely fun to play through. With this being said, these initial impressions though, unfortunately they don't last long, and what you will find is a world of repetition and some near game-breaking graphical issues that don't make themselves apparent for the first couple of levels. What it essentially does is it pulls you into a false sense of security only to screw you, and not in the fun way. First, the more minor issue, shall we say. The game is called Garage after all, and that's the single environment you will find yourself in. Honestly, from the name I should have guessed it, but I'll warn you now, expect deja vu near constantly. Now while the graphics, they are well done and some of the boss design is awesome, as I said, there's just not enough here to break up the game, and before long you'll find yourself feeling like you're just retreading the same rooms and objects as you did 100 times before. Now, to credit the developers, they have tried to break up the environments a little bit. They've included some great moments. One in particular was on a train, but it's over in about 30 seconds and it's back to the same rooms and corridors with very little to distinguish one from the next. Then we have the big one, and the biggest problem we found in Garage is a technical design decision, one that simply hasn't paid off because, well, functionally speaking, it's broken. This is the idea that items and enemies are only visible when they are in your line of sight or you are in the room. This means you can't move away from enemies. If you do, they will repeatedly pop in and out of the screen, and it creates an almost unfinished look to the entire game. It feels like it's more of a bug, an issue with popping, than anything that was actually a creative decision. This problem then is exaggerated because, well, it simply just doesn't work correctly. So what I mean by this is that sometimes I could see pickups from rooms across the screen, other times they were simply missing, and they would only appear on closer inspection. Then the enemies, and this is the biggest pain point of them all, even when they were in my line of sight, they would still pop in and pop out of frame like my character was blinking his way to an early death. This issue was reinforced on a number of occasions where enemies would, well, disappear, but as I shot at them in their general direction, sound effects would still play suggesting I hit them. Now how could I hit them if they're not in my line of sight? Then what happens next is they would frequently reappear right next to me and of course send me to an early grave. What started as a design decision for the title has turned into by far its biggest problem because, well, simply put, it doesn't work well and it comes off more often than not as a performance issue with pop-in than a necessary element of the game. This issue is immediately apparent, especially when it comes to the armed enemies. Melee is one thing because I could still manage to position myself away. If it was an armed soldier, I had absolutely no chance as they reappear and start immediately shooting. The graphics, it starts off so well, but it quickly results in repetitive, often bland environments, and unfortunately, broken design decisions that destroy the entire experience. So let's talk gameplay, and aside from the pop-in issue which creates a huge amount of unnecessary challenge, we have what is essentially, as I've said, a top-down shooter. Controls boil down to movement with the left stick, aim with the right, a dodge mechanic that's unfortunately just awkward to use and seems to go in a different direction to your input, and two attacks, punch and kick. These are of course dependent on if you have one of the plentiful weapons on hand, and I've got to say there is a nice selection there, everything from an axe to an M16 to an Uzi. There's a good selection here to match any style of gameplay. Now, opening the first two levels, a glaring issue though it became apparent, and that was the movement speed. In these early stages you'll find yourself with simply punch and kick mechanics or an axe, meaning close quarters combat, and unfortunately it was impossible to move in, attack and move out without getting hit. The controls are simply not optimized for this style of gameplay. They even need to speed up the movement to allow those quick in and out movement patterns, or they need to include some form of a block mechanic. It would have been well placed here and very much appreciated. Then when it comes to the gunplay, it fares a little better. It's responsive and each weapon it feels unique, mainly thanks to the different aiming reticles which represent the shot types nicely. So a shotgun's of course spread out and a pistol's going to be more fine-tuned and a single bullet. Unfortunately again, however, the game falls down with the aiming here. Typically with a game such as this, you aim in the general direction and shoot. It's pretty standard. However, the target here actually moves on its own. It will lock on. So let's say you have 3 to 4 enemies in your view. Trying to aim at one specific individual becomes an absolute lesson in patience. A prime example of this was actually a boss who spits out rats. Now, I wanted to use valuable shotgun bullets on him. It's pretty much the best option available due to his overall power. However, the target kept locking onto these tiny rats and wasting my ammo. Of course, what followed was near immediate death when I ran out of bullets too early and I tried to use the near useless melee options at my disposal. The problem here though is it didn't feel like I lost down to my skill level, rather the game was ignoring my input or doing something automatically that was just simply, well, wrong. Finally, on top of all of this, the game lacks any real control tutorials. Now, granted, it's easy enough to pick up, but some moments, one great example being a short motorbike sequence, it gives you zero guidance on how to actually move the damn thing, but it does respond by throwing an army of zombies at you. I died twice before I could work out the control inputs for accelerate or decelerate. These are simple things that should not be missed, and a simple text overlay or a short pause moment would fix this issue almost instantly. Overall, the gameplay, I'll say this, it works, but it's far from the peak of the genre. Melee suffers from slow movement capabilities, you're almost always hit, and the gunplay is plagued with a targeting reticle that has a mind of its own and kicks into auto-aim at the worst possible moments. This could again easily be solved by just letting us aim in the general direction. It doesn't need that level of input here. Finally, sound and music, and let's talk music first. This is perhaps the most enjoyable segment of the game. The music, it's very understated and it's more tonal than anything, but it suits the visuals nicely. It embodies the horror of the game, and it definitely gave me a few moments where I physically jumped. It also supports the storyline nicely and reinforces the more intense moments to create an overall thematic soundtrack that works to the game's influences. Then we have sound effects, and they're not bad. The guns sound nice, and there's enough sound response in the objects around you that the world does feel alive. One problem I did find though was the enemies. The sounds attached, they're on loop, and they seem to play maybe 1 or 2 samples over and over again. Now that's not so bad when there's one enemy on screen, but it's definitely noticeable when the same soundbite is layering itself over and over with tons of enemies on screen at once. So the final verdict, and honestly, I went into Garage ready to like it, and what a letdown it was. First, the gameplay could be described as mediocre at best. It works, it's responsive, but the design doesn't match the gameplay. Melee combat then is near impossible without getting hit, and the gunplay has the targeting decision of a madman. Then the music and sound, and things take a step up here, then it's not bad at all in this area. There's a couple of minor issues that I touched on, but it's nothing you wouldn't be willing to overlook. But it's the graphics that are the real problem here, and mainly in the performance sense. Starting off initially strong with a nice opening level, it quickly spirals to near unplayable, where enemies are just disappearing and reappearing around you. It adds a level of difficulty that is generated through essentially frustration. This game, as I said, it was designed to be difficult and embody the genre, but unfortunately this issue just makes it near impossible at this point to recommend to any players out there until we see a decent patch. The Gaming X awards Garage a generous 4 out of 10. You can see that there's a good game in here. At points when I weren't being plagued by teleporting enemies, in fact, I was having a lot of fun, and that sums the experience up nicely. Simply fixing these graphical performance anomalies, it would instantly raise this one to a 5 out of 10. It's a fun storyline, especially for fans of more grindhouse fare. Then, if we could fix the targeting issues, this one would perhaps even reach a high 6, maybe a 7. I really wanted to like this one, and perhaps with a few updates, there's still some hope of that happening. So what do you think? Was you looking forward to this one, or are these graphical issues and performance problems enough to hold you back from picking it up? My suggestion personally is wait until we hear about a few updates. I've got a feeling I'm going to get some kickback on this review because I know a lot of people were looking forward to it, and I can tell you this, I was one of them people, but unfortunately this one is a letdown. Thanks so much for watching, and if you are new here, why not hit that subscribe button for all our latest news, reviews and giveaways. We truly do appreciate the support, and we have some fantastic content coming up. We'll see you soon on the next Gaming X.